Welcome to the Body Science Podcast.
Great to be diving into this.
Yeah, so today we're looking at building that strong, healthy body the natural way. No performance-enhancing drugs, just pure dedication to training and smart recovery. But, a lot of people wonder, am I really getting the most out of this? Are my results maximized?
You're right. It's a common question.
We've been looking closely at a specific guide, really focused on sustainable growth without any chemical help.
Yeah.
And our goal today, really, is to pull out the absolute core nutritional insights, the things that genuinely matter for natural muscle growth and, overall health, based on what this material suggests.
It's so important because, training gets a lot of the spotlight, right? But nutrition, as this source really hammers home, it's arguably way more impactful, especially when it's just your body doing the work.
Absolutely. And this guide, it doesn't mess around. It jumps right in with that classic mantra, the body is made in the kitchen.
Yeah, and that's, it's more than just a catchy phrase here. It's fundamental. It directly links what you eat to your body composition.
Like literally the muscle to fat ratio.
Exactly, what your body is actually made of.
And the analysis in the source material is, it's pretty striking. It suggests diet's influence on that composition is something like 5 times greater than your physical training.
5 times?
Yeah, think about that. All the hours in the gym, and then diet is potentially 5 times more powerful.
It forces you to think differently, doesn't it? And the why behind it is key. Your workouts, they cause that microscopic damage to muscle fibers. It's necessary stress.
Right, the breakdown phase. You need that to signal growth.
Precisely. But the rebuilding, that's all nutrition and rest.
The source uses this great analogy. Nutrients are the bricks.
The building blocks.
Exactly. The bricks to repair those damaged cells and build new tissue. And they're also the fuel for, energy metabolism, running your workouts, sure, but also just keeping everything functioning. So, okay, let's say you're crushing it in the gym, doing the breakdown part perfectly, but you're skimping on the bricks, the nutrition side. What happens then?
Well, simply put, your muscles just can't recover properly. They can't grow effectively. You might feel run down, your performance stalls, maybe even goes backward. You're accumulating stress without the resources to adapt. You're tearing down but not building back stronger.
That seems incredibly counterproductive.
It is. And this guide really highlights how vital this is, especially if you're just starting out. You hear about newbie gains.
Yeah, that initial rapid progress phase.
Right. Well, proper nutrition isn't just helpful during that phase. The source argues it's absolutely essential to actually capitalize on that potential. Your body's primed to respond, but it needs the materials.
It needs the fuel and the bricks you mentioned.
Exactly. And this also ties into the idea that natural bodybuilding isn't just about weight loss or gain. It's about quality change.
Building muscle, losing fat, changing the composition.
Yes. And that specific outcome demands a really strategic nutritional plan. Not just eating less or more, but eating the right things in the right amounts.
Okay, so the big takeaway here, the message that seems to run through this whole section of the source is pretty clear then.
Which is?
You need to put as much, maybe even more, planning and effort into your diet, the shopping, the prep, the timing, as you do into planning your workouts.
Absolutely. It flips the script. Diet isn't the sidekick. It's potentially the main character in your transformation story, especially when you're going natural.
Okay, so if nutrition is that powerful, how does this guide suggest approaching it? What are the ground rules for, sustainable drug-free growth?
It boils down to 2 core principles, really acting as guiding values: health and sustainability.
Health and sustainability, not just quick results.
No, definitely not. These are positioned as non-negotiable. The approach explicitly warns against extreme methods, those super restrictive diets or protocols that might give you fast, temporary changes, but could mess with your long-term health, physically or mentally.
So the focus is building health first. Why is that so critical, specifically for muscle growth?
Well, think about it. A genuinely healthy body just works better. Hormones are better regulated, super important for muscle building. Nutrient absorption is more efficient. Your immune system is stronger. Energy levels are more stable.
Okay, so better overall function.
Right. And that optimal function, it translates directly. Better performance in your workouts, faster, more complete recovery between sessions. And that leads to more consistent, sustainable muscle growth over the long haul. Your body's just in a better position to respond positively to the training.
Makes sense. And the second principle, sustainability. What does that mean in this context?
It's about acknowledging reality. Natural bodybuilding is a long game, right? A marathon.
Definitely not a sprint.
So for any diet plan to actually work, you have to be able to stick with it, not for 6 weeks, but potentially for years.
So it needs to be livable.
Exactly. The guide stresses practical flexibility. It needs to fit around your social life sometimes, accommodate foods you actually enjoy, and just feel, well, manageable, enjoyable even, so you can follow it consistently.
So it's not about creating this super rigid, isolated lifestyle.
No, quite the opposite. This focus on sustainability is meant to help you avoid those damaging cycles, extreme restriction, then maybe binging or rebound eating.
Yeah, that yo-yo effect.
Right. It steers clear of making you afraid of certain foods or creating an unhealthy relationship with eating.
Instead, it's about building skills.
Yeah.
And the guide, it doesn't just talk philosophy, right?
Yeah.
It lays out a kind of roadmap.
Yeah, it gets practical. It touches on the key areas you need to understand and manage. Things like energy balance, the whole calories in versus calories out equation.
The foundation.
Absolutely. Then it dives into macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats, their roles, optimal ratios, getting enough bricks and fuel.
Okay. What else?
Strategies for structuring meals across the day to support your training, your recovery, identifying common mistakes people make with nutrition that might be holding them back.
Troubleshooting. That's useful.
Very. And crucially, it talks about mindset, developing the right mental approach for sticking with it long term, because consistency really is everything.
It sounds like a comprehensive approach grounded in science and practical experience for natural trainees.
That's the aim, to give you the core principles and the tools based on research relevant to drug-free lifters so you can cut down on the guesswork, the trial and error, and just move towards your goals more effectively and, importantly, sustainably. It's about understanding the why.
Which helps you make your own informed choices down the line.
Exactly. It empowers you.
So, thinking about everything we've just discussed, if nutrition really could have, say, 5 times the impact of training, and the key is this health-first, sustainable approach, what happens if you consciously shift your focus? You put more deliberate energy into the kitchen side of the equation. How might that change not just your body, but maybe your whole perspective on building strength and health?
All right, let's dive into the real core of, what fuels our bodies, right? Protein, carbohydrates, and fats.
The big 3. Macronutrients.
Exactly. And understanding them is pretty fundamental if you're serious about physical goals like building muscle or changing your body composition.
It really is. It's not just about, counting grams. It's understanding why they matter and, importantly, how to make them work for you.
Okay, so let's kick things off with protein. Everyone talks about it. The sources we looked at definitely emphasize its importance. Why is it such a big deal?
Well, fundamentally, protein is your body's builder. Think about when you exercise, especially resistance training, you cause tiny tears in your muscle fibers.
Right.
Protein provides the raw materials, the amino acids, to repair that damage and build the muscle back stronger. That's muscle protein synthesis. It's essential.
And some of those amino acids, we have to get them from food, don't we? The essential ones.
Precisely. Your body can't make them. So getting a complete range through your diet is critical, not just for muscle, but, hormones, enzymes, immune function. It's involved in almost everything.
So the big question for muscle growth, how much protein do you actually need? What did the research suggest?
The consensus generally lands somewhere between, say, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. That seems to be the sweet spot for maximizing muscle growth.
Okay, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo.
Yeah, and interestingly, some of the data suggests that if you're in a fat loss phase, pushing towards the higher end of that, maybe even a touch more, say 1.5 or up to 2.2 grams per kilo, or like 0.7 to 1.0 grams per pound, can be really beneficial.
For preserving muscle while dieting down.
Exactly. Helps you hold on to that hard-earned muscle while you're cutting calories.
Makes sense. Where should people focus on getting this protein?
Quality sources are key. So lean meats, chicken breast, turkey, lean beef, they're staples. Fish like salmon, tuna, cod, eggs, egg whites are great. And dairy like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese.
What about plant-based folks? Plenty of options there too. Tofu, tempeh, lentils are excellent. Beans as well. You might need to be a bit more mindful about combining different sources throughout the day to get that full amino acid profile. And of course, protein supplements, whey, casein, or plant-based powders, they can be really convenient ways to help you hit those targets, especially around workouts.
Okay, let's tackle a common myth. More protein is always better. The sources kind of push back on that, don't they?
They absolutely do. It's a persistent one. While getting enough protein is crucial, the research shows that once you go much beyond that 2.2 gigaoctane mark, the extra muscle building benefit really drops off, like significantly.
So just piling it on doesn't necessarily speed things up.
Not really. And it can even be counterproductive if you're filling up on so much protein that you're skimping on carbs or healthy fats.
Right. You displace other important nutrients. Exactly. You might find your workout performance suffers because you don't have the fuel, or maybe hormonal issues creep in from too little fat. It's about finding that optimal amount for you, hitting it consistently, and focusing on quality from diverse sources, not just brute force intake.
Okay, so protein builds and repairs. Let's move to the fuel. Carbohydrates. Often misunderstood, often blamed. What's their main job?
Carbs are basically the body's preferred high-octane fuel source. When you eat them, they get broken down and stored mostly as glycogen in your muscles and liver.
Glycogen, okay.
And that stored glycogen is the readily available energy your body taps into, especially for intense stuff like lifting weights or sprinting.
This is not just about energy during the workout.
Oh, definitely not. Yes, they fuel performance during training, which is vital. But they're also critical for recovery. After you train, you need carbs to replenish those depleted glycogen stores. That speeds up recovery. Plus, they help with mental focus, general energy levels.
The sources often talk about good versus bad carbs. How should we think about that distinction? Is it helpful?
It's a simplification, but it gets at a key difference: how quickly they digest and affect blood sugar. Good carbs, or complex carbs, think whole grains, sweet potatoes, veggies, fruits, legumes, they digest more slowly.
So more sustained energy.
Right. Stable blood sugar, sustained energy, plus they usually come with fiber and micronutrients, which helps you feel full.
And the bad ones are the opposite.
Pretty much. Similar refined carbs, sugary drinks, candy, white bread, pastries, they hit your bloodstream fast. Big blood sugar spike, often followed by a crash. And if you're not burning that energy right away, your body's pretty efficient at storing it as fat.
Does timing matter much with carbs? Like when you eat them around workouts?
It can be strategic, yeah. Having some carbs, maybe easier to digest ones, before training can top off your glycogen stores and boost performance.
And after?
Getting carbs in relatively soon after training helps kickstart that glycogen replenishment, which is key for recovery and being ready for your next session.
What happens if someone drastically cuts carbs, especially if they're training hard?
Well, performance usually tanks pretty quickly. You deplete those muscle glycogen stores, you feel fatigued, less powerful, maybe even get that brain fog or irritability.
The carb flu.
Exactly. It makes high-intensity training really tough, and honestly, makes sticking to the plan harder. For anyone trying to build or even just maintain muscle, especially naturally, getting enough carbs is pretty crucial to support intense training.
Okay, let's bust that big one. Carbs make you fat. Seems like the sources definitively say no.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest, most damaging myths out there. Carbs themselves don't make you fat.
Right.
Eating too many calories overall consistently is what leads to fat gain, regardless of whether those calories come from carbs, fat, or protein.
It's just easier to overeat certain types of carbs.
That's often the case, yeah. Highly processed, sugary carbs are easy to consume in large quantities without feeling very full. But focusing on whole food carb sources and managing total calories, that's the key for body composition.
So good sources again, just to recap.
Sure. Brown rice, quinoa, oats, whole wheat pasta, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes too, fruits like bananas, berries, apples, and legumes, beans, lentils. Lots of good nutrient-dense options.
Okay. Protein builds, carbs, fuel. That leaves fats. They had a bad reputation for decades. What's the real story, according to the research?
Yeah, the low-fat craze did a lot of damage, nutritionally speaking. Fats are absolutely essential. They're not just for energy storage.
What else did they do?
So many things. They form the structure of every cell membrane in your body. They're crucial for producing hormones, including vital ones like testosterone, obviously important for muscle growth and recovery. Plus, you need fats to absorb certain vitamins. A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. They play roles in brain health, inflammation, really critical stuff.
And like carbs, there are different types of fats we should know about.
Definitely. You've got your healthy unsaturated fats that includes monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats like the essential omega-3s and omega-6s. Those are the ones to prioritize.
Where do we find those?
Avocados, nuts like almonds and walnuts, seeds like flax and chia, olive oil, fatty fish like salmon and mackerel are packed with omega-3s, nut butters too.
Okay. Then there are saturated fats.
Right, found mostly in animal products like fatty meats and full-fat dairy, also coconut oil. The advice is generally to consume these more moderately. Not necessarily eliminate, but be mindful.
And the ones to avoid?
Trans fats. These are typically man-made fats found in processed foods, fried foods, some baked goods. They're strongly linked to heart disease risk, so the goal should be to minimize or avoid them completely.
What happens if you go too low on fat, like extreme low-fat diets?
It can cause real problems. You risk deficiencies in those essential fatty acids I mentioned. You impair your ability to absorb vitamins A, D, E, K. And crucially for fitness goals, it can mess with hormone production.
Lower testosterone, for example.
Yes, several sources highlight that link. Very low-fat diets can negatively impact hormone levels, which directly hinders muscle growth, recovery, mood, energy, you name it. It can cause a cascade of issues.
But fats are calorie dense, right? That's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Fats have 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbs have 4. So portion control is important, especially if managing overall calories is a goal. But the key takeaway is quality fats in appropriate amounts are non-negotiable for health and body composition. It's about smart choices, not elimination.
So we've got the builder protein, the fuel, carbs, and the essential supporter, fats. How does someone actually put this together? How do you find the right balance for your own body? The sources stress individuality here.
Hugely individual. There's no single perfect macro ratio that works for everyone. Your ideal split of percentage of calories from protein, carbs, and fat really depends on your specific goals. Muscle gain, fat loss, maintenance, how your body responds, your activity level, even your preferences and lifestyle.
Are there general guidelines or starting points people can use?
Yeah, the research provides some common starting points. Like for muscle gain, a ballpark might be 40-50% carbs, 30-40% protein, 20-30% fat. For fat loss, maybe you'd shift it slightly, potentially lower carbs, maybe higher protein for satiety and muscle preservation. Something like 30% carbs, 40% protein, 30% fat could be a starting point.
But these are just starting points, not rigid rules.
Absolutely not. They're based on averages, but you might thrive on slightly higher carbs or feel better with more fats. The crucial part, stressed repeatedly in the material we looked at, is to use these as a launch pad.
And then adjust based on feedback.
Precisely. Track your intake, yes, but more importantly, pay attention to how your body responds. Track your weight, sure, but also energy levels, how your workouts feel, recovery, maybe even body measurements or photos over time. Use that real-world feedback to tweak your ratios.
So it sounds like embracing a bit of experimentation is necessary.
Definitely. Being overly rigid can actually backfire. It adds stress and makes it harder to stick with long-term. Flexibility allows you to adapt. For beginners, maybe don't get bogged down in exact percentages right away. Focus on tracking consistently to understand what you're currently eating, and then make small adjustments based on how you look, feel, and perform. Listen to your body.
That process of tracking and adjusting leads to another really important point, quality over just quantity, right? Hitting your numbers isn't the whole story.
Oh, absolutely critical. This tackles the potential pitfall of like a super extreme if it fits your macros approach, where only the numbers count. The source of those macros matters immensely.
How so?
Well, think about it. 200 calories from grilled chicken and broccoli versus 200 calories from, I don't know, gummy bears. They hit your body very differently in terms of hormones, satiety, blood sugar response, and micronutrient.
Right, nutrient density.
Exactly. Whole, minimally processed foods, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, healthy fats are packed with vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants. These things support everything: immune function, recovery, energy metabolism, gut health. They also tend to be much more filling.
And processed foods often lack those things.
They often do. Plus, they can be high in added sugars, unhealthy fats, sodium, and various additives. Relying heavily on processed foods can contribute to inflammation, mess with blood sugar control, slow down recovery, and just generally make managing your nutrition and health harder in the long run.
So is the message eat perfectly clean 100% of the time? Because that feels unrealistic for most people.
No, and the sources generally agree perfection isn't the goal, nor is it usually sustainable. A more practical approach often mentioned is something like an 80-20 rule. Aim for, say, 80% of your intake to come from those nutrient-dense whole foods.
And the other 20% is for flexibility.
Exactly. Room for foods you enjoy that might be less nutrient-dense, social situations, treats. It makes the whole thing more sustainable and less stressful. The key is consistency in making most of your choices good ones. That's what drives long-term results and health.
Okay, so we've covered protein, carbs, and fats, the builders, the fuel, the supporters. It seems clear they all work together, right?
Absolutely. They're deeply interconnected. You can't optimize one while completely neglecting the others, not if you want the best results for performance, body composition, and just overall health. It's a synergistic relationship.
And it really comes back to not just knowing the science, but applying it personally, paying attention and adjusting. It's an ongoing process.
It really is. Understanding these macronutrients is step one, but perhaps the real deep dive is learning to listen to your own body's feedback and becoming an active driver of your own nutrition strategy, finding what truly works and is sustainable for you.
Okay, so changing your body composition, building muscle, losing fat, it sounds pretty straightforward in theory, right? Eat well, train hard.
Yeah, but anyone who's actually tried it knows the reality can feel, well, incredibly complex. There's just so much advice flying around, often conflicting.
Totally. It's easy to get lost in the weeds, focusing on this specific diet or that exact workout plan.
Exactly. So our goal here in this deep dive is really to pull back a bit. Let's focus on the fundamental principles, the things that actually govern this whole process.
Okay.
Understanding these core ideas, kind of like getting the master key.
Yeah, grasping the what's and the why behind the strategies that actually work. And really, at the heart of it all, there's this surprisingly simple concept that dictates weight change, whether you're going up, down, or just staying put.
And that core principle is energy balance. It's the absolute foundation.
Okay.
Quite simply, it's just the relationship between the energy, the calories you take in and the energy your body uses up.
So energy in versus energy out. Simple as that.
Fundamentally, yes. When the calories you eat match the calories you expend for everything, breathing, thinking, working out, just living hale, you maintain your weight.
Okay.
The second that balance shifts, your weight changes. It has to.
And that shift gives us the basic states we're always talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like bulking or cutting.
Exactly. So to gain weight, and specifically aiming for muscle here, you need what's called a caloric surplus.
Meaning eating more.
Eating more calories consistently than your body actually needs just to maintain itself. That extra energy is what fuels muscle repair, growth, and recovery after you've challenged your muscles in training.
You're fueling the factory, basically, so
Yeah.
it has the resources to build.
Precisely. And then conversely, to lose body fat, you absolutely must be in a caloric deficit,
Eating less.
consuming fewer calories than your body is burning. When that happens, your body has no other option. It has to tap into its stored energy reserves to make up the difference.
And those reserves are mainly body fat.
Primarily body fat, yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, burning the stored fuel. So how do you even start figuring out how much energy your body uses? That seems like the first step.
Right. You need a decent estimate of your total daily energy expenditure, or TDE.
TDE, okay.
Think of it as your daily calorie budget. And importantly, it's not just about exercise. It includes your basal metabolic rate, your BMR.
That's just keeping the lights on, right? At rest.
Exactly. Energy to keep you alive, breathing, organs functioning. It's often the biggest chunk of your PDEE.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add the energy for all physical activity structured workouts, sure, but also just walking, fidgeting, daily life stuff.
Non-exercise activity, yeah.
And finally, there's the thermic effect of food, TEA. The energy your body uses just to digest and process the food you eat. It's smaller, but it adds up.
Got it. So you estimate that TDEE, then how big should this surplus or deficit actually be? It sounds like you don't want to just, go crazy with it either way.
No, definitely not. That's a really critical point.
Mm-hmm.
For building muscle, the sources generally suggest a moderate surplus, often somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% above your estimated TDEE.
Okay, and what does that look like in actual calories, roughly?
Typically, it shakes out to about maybe 200 to 500 extra calories per day, give or take.
So not a massive all-you-can-eat buffet every day.
Not if you want quality gains, no. And similarly for fat loss, you're aiming for a moderate deficit. Again, usually around 10 to 20% below your TDEE.
So maybe 200 to 500 fewer calories per day.
Exactly. That same sort of moderate range.
So why is sticking to that moderate zone so important? What actually happens if you push it too hard, like a huge surplus or a really deep deficit?
Well, going too far is where things get pretty counterproductive.
Hmm.
If you're in a massive surplus, sure, you'll gain weight fast, but a much bigger chunk of that weight gain is just going to be excess body fat.
Fat you didn't want and now have to lose later.
Precisely. And it'll make that eventual fat loss phase much harder and longer.
And the risk with a huge deficit, that sounds potentially worse.
It definitely has more significant downsides.
Yeah.
An overly aggressive deficit dramatically increases the risk of losing valuable muscle tissue, which is the exact opposite of what you want when you're training hard.
Right. Undermining your efforts.
Completely. Plus, it can seriously tank your metabolic rate, lead to nutrient deficiencies, mess with your hormones, and honestly, just make you feel pretty awful physically and mentally, exhausted, irritable.
So the moderate gradual approach isn't just about making it easier, it's actually about getting a better result in the end, protecting the muscle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the key thing to remember here always is that these TDEE calculations, they're estimates.
Right, not exact science for any individual.
They're a starting point. A good one, but still a starting point. The real skill comes in the continuous monitoring and adjustment. You have to pay attention to what your body is telling you.
How the scale is moving, but
Also your strength in the gym, your energy levels, how well you're recovering, how you feel day to day. That feedback loop is crucial for fine-tuning things and finding the right energy balance for you and adjusting it over time as your body changes.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's take that energy balance idea and apply it. If your main goal right now is building muscle, that takes us into what people usually call bulking.
Right. Bulking is simply that intentional phase where you're eating in that controlled caloric surplus we talked about. The specific goal is maximizing muscle growth.
And it seems like there are kind of two main ways people talk about doing this.
Yeah, broadly speaking, there's the clean bulk and then the dirty bulk.
Okay, clean versus dirty.
So a clean bulk really emphasizes getting those extra calories primarily from nutrient-dense, whole, minimally processed foods. The surplus is controlled. It's gradual, like that TDEE plus 200, 300 calories, maybe aiming to build as much lean muscle as possible while keeping fat gain to a minimum.
Makes sense. And the dirty bulk sounds less concerned with food quality.
Pretty much, yeah. The dirty bulk often just prioritizes hitting a really high calorie number, however you can. Often that means relying heavily on calorie-dense but nutrient-poor stuff. Processed foods, junk food, fast food.
Just shovel it in.
The mindset is often just eat everything in sight to gain weight as fast as possible.
Okay, so what's the actual problem with that eat anything approach? I mean, it sounds like a fast track to getting bigger.
Well, you do gain weight rapidly, that's true.
Yeah.
But a significant portion of that weight is very likely just excess body fat.
Okay.
And what the material really highlights is that this isn't just about how you look. Carrying a lot of unnecessary body fat makes the next phase, the cut, to lose that fat significantly harder and much longer.
Right, you dug yourself a deeper hole.
Exactly. Plus, it can actually introduce health issues, things like poor insulin sensitivity. And maybe most importantly, when you eventually do diet down to lose all that extra fat, the risk of losing a good chunk of the hard-earned muscle along with it is much, much higher if you started with a ton of excess fat from that dirty bulk.
So that quick weight gain early on can really come back to bite you later when you try to lean out. You might lose the muscle you gained anyway.
Precisely. Which is why a clean bulk, even though it definitely requires more patience and more consistent effort with your food choices, it's generally seen as the healthier and much more effective long-term strategy.
Better quality gains.
You build muscle with less unwanted fat, you maintain better health markers, and you set yourself up for a much smoother, shorter, and more successful fat loss phase down the road. Smart bulking is about focused, quality growth.
And realistic goals here might look like?
Maybe aiming to gain around, say, 0.5 to 1% of your total body weight per month. So maybe half a kilo to a kilo, something like that. Gain consistently alongside consistent hard strength training.
All right, let's flip the coin completely. What about when the goal is shedding fat? The phase everyone calls cutting.
Okay, so cutting. This is the strategic phase where you're deliberately operating in that caloric deficit. The primary goal is reducing body fat, but, and this is key, while doing absolutely everything you can to preserve the muscle mass you've built.
Yeah, that sounds like the real tightrope walk we mentioned earlier. Losing fat without losing muscle. That's the tricky part.
It absolutely requires a smart strategic approach. There are several principles that become pretty much non-negotiable during a cut.
Okay, like what?
First, and arguably most important, keeping your protein intake high. Really high.
Why protein specifically?
Protein is absolutely crucial when you're in a calorie deficit. It helps signal your body to hold on to muscle tissue, basically telling it not to break down muscle for energy. Plus, protein has a high thermic effect itself, and it's very satiating, which helps you manage hunger when calories are lower.
Makes sense. How high are we talking compared to maybe maintenance or bulking?
The recommendations often go up significantly during a cutting phase. The materials suggest a range often cited between, say, 1.8 grams up to maybe even 2.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Wow, that's quite a jump for some people.
It's a substantial amount, yeah. And it really highlights just how critical protein is during this phase.
Okay, so protein is like the bodyguard for your muscle while you're losing fat. What else is key?
Pacing. You got to pace yourself. Just like we warned against those extreme surpluses, avoiding overly aggressive calorie deficits during a cut is just as vital.
So no crash dieting.
Absolutely not. Rapid weight loss might sound appealing, but if you're consistently losing much more than about, say, 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week, you significantly increase the risk of losing muscle mass along with the fat.
And losing muscle, again, makes everything harder long term, right? Slows metabolism.
It does. Less muscle generally means a lower metabolic rate. That makes it harder to keep losing fat and easier to regain fat once the diet ends. Plus, it's just much harder on your body and your mind to sustain a really aggressive cut. Slow and steady really does win the race here.
You also mentioned earlier you can't just rely on diet alone.
Exactly. Which brings us to the third critical point for cutting. Keep lifting heavy. Keep up that strength training.
Even though you're in a deficit and maybe feel weaker.
Especially then. Consistent resistance training is non-negotiable during a cut. It provides the essential stimulus, the signal that tells your body, hey, we still need this muscle, don't get rid of it.
So it's the signal to preserve.
Yes. While cardio is great for helping burn extra calories and contributing to that deficit, strength training is the primary driver for muscle preservation during a cut. You need both, ideally, but don't ditch the weights.
Okay, so cutting isn't about slashing calories to nothing and doing hours of cardio. It's really a strategic combination. A moderate deficit, super high protein, and keep lifting weights consistently.
That sums it up really well. It's all about aiming for sustainable, muscle-sparing fat loss.
Now, let's shift to something that, well, a lot of people see as the ultimate goal, maybe the holy grail of fitness: body recomposition.
Yes, recomposition.
The idea of actually gaining muscle and losing body fat at the same time.
It is definitely seen as that ideal scenario, you're right.
Yeah.
And on the surface, it does seem to kind of contradict the basic energy balance rules we just laid out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like trying to do two opposite things at once, needing a surplus for muscle, needing a deficit for fat loss. How does that work?
Well, the thing is, it is actually possible. But,
Yeah.
and this is a big but, primarily under specific, pretty limited conditions.
Okay, so it's not just a myth, but it's not something everyone can just decide to do effectively.
Exactly. It's real, but context matters hugely.
So who can realistically expect to achieve noticeable body recomposition?
The source material points to a few main groups. First, complete beginners. Yeah. When someone is brand new to proper strength training and maybe improving their diet, their body is incredibly sensitive to that new stimulus. They can often build muscle and lose fat simultaneously. It's the famous newbie gains phenomenon.
The beginner's magic window.
It really is kind of magical, yeah. Another group is people who are returning to training after a significant time off, like months or years.
Detrained individuals.
Right. They benefit from what's often called muscle memory. Their muscles can regrow relatively quickly back towards their previous state, often while they're simultaneously losing some of the fat they might have gained during the break.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third group?
The third group is individuals who start out with relatively higher levels of body fat.
Okay, why them?
Because when you have significant stored energy already available in the form of body fat, your body has a readily accessible fuel source. It can tap into to power muscle building, especially when combined with sufficient protein intake and the training stimulus. It can kind of fuel the muscle growth with its own fat stores to an extent.
Got it. So if you don't fall into one of those categories, if you're, say, an intermediate or advanced lifter who's been training consistently and isn't carrying a lot of excess body fat, recomposition isn't really a realistic primary goal.
Generally, no. For intermediate or advanced trainees who are already fairly lean, achieving significant recomposition, like noticeably gaining muscle while noticeably losing fat at the same time, is either incredibly slow, almost imperceptible, or just doesn't happen effectively.
So setting realistic expectations here is absolutely crucial to avoid just getting frustrated and quitting.
Couldn't agree more. So probably one of the biggest sources of frustration for people. For beginners, enjoy that recomposition phase. It's a fantastic head start. But you have to understand that after that initial period, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, it usually becomes far more efficient to switch focus.
To dedicated phases.
Exactly. Either a dedicated, controlled bulk to prioritize muscle gain or a dedicated strategic cut to prioritize fat loss. Trying to chase significant recomposition indefinitely when you're past that beginner stage often just leads to spinning your wheels and not making much progress on either front.
Okay. But if someone is in one of those categories where recomposition is a viable strategy, beginner, returning, higher body fat, What does the approach typically look like? Is it just eating at maintenance?
Pretty much. The suggestion is usually to set calorie intake right around your estimated maintenance level. Maybe a tiny deficit, maybe a tiny surplus, but very close to balance.
So not pushing hard in either direction.
Right. And just like with cutting, prioritizing a high protein intake is absolutely key. That provides the building blocks for muscle. And of course, consistent, challenging strength training is non-negotiable. That's the stimulus telling the body to build or retain muscle.
It really does sound like high protein and consistent lifting are the common threads, the foundation, regardless of whether you're bulking, cutting, or trying a recomp.
They absolutely are. The energy balance changes, but the need for protein and training stimulus remains constant.
Okay, let's talk about something really common and often super frustrating that people hit, especially if they're in a long cutting phase: the plateau.
Ah, the dreaded plateau.
You feel like you're doing everything right, sticking to the plan, but the scale just stops moving, fat loss stalls out. What's going on there?
It's incredibly common and, yeah, very demotivating. Often what's happening is a physiological response called metabolic adaptation, sometimes called adaptive thermogenesis.
Metabolic adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like your body is kind of fighting back against the diet.
In a way, yeah, you could think of it like that. It's basically your body's natural survival mechanism kicking in. When it senses a prolonged period of reduced calorie intake, it starts to become more efficient.
More efficient at using energy.
Exactly. Your basal metabolic rate, that energy burn at rest, might slow down a bit. You might unconsciously start moving less throughout the day, less fidgeting, taking the elevator more, that kind of thing, reducing your NEAT.
Right.
Even the energy cost of digesting food, the TF, can decrease slightly. Your body is essentially trying to lower its overall energy expenditure to match the lower energy intake. It's trying to conserve energy because it thinks resources might be scarce.
So hitting a plateau isn't necessarily a sign that you failed or did something wrong. It's more like a normal biological adjustment.
Precisely. Recognizing it as a natural adaptation, not some kind of personal failing, is really the crucial first step. The big pitfall is how people often react to it.
Which is usually
Panic, and then drastically cutting calories even further, or adding tons and tons of extra cardio, just trying to force the scale down harder.
why is that the wrong move? It seems intuitive. If it stopped working, just do more of it or less food.
Because that can actually make the metabolic adaptation worse. It digs you deeper into that slowed down state. It also dramatically increases physical and mental stress, raises cortisol, can mess with hormones even more, increase risks of nutrient deficiencies, and frankly, it just makes the whole process miserable and unsustainable. It often leads to burnout and people giving up entirely.
Okay, so brute force isn't the answer. How do you strategically break through a plateau then, working with this metabolic adaptation idea?
Well, the material outlines several more advanced nutritional strategies that are designed specifically for this purpose. One common one is implementing a diet break.
A break from the diet.
Exactly. This usually involves taking maybe 1 to 2 weeks to intentionally bring your calorie intake back up to your estimated maintenance level.
So stop the deficit for a bit.
Right. The idea is to give your body a signal that food isn't actually scarce anymore. This can help normalize some of those hormones that regulate metabolism, like leptin, potentially help restore some metabolic rate, and honestly just provide huge psychological relief from the grind of dieting.
Taking a strategic pause to reset things a bit. Interesting.
It can be incredibly effective, yeah. Another strategy is calorie cycling.
What's that?
This involves varying your calorie intake throughout the week instead of eating the same deficit every single day. So maybe eat a bit more, closer to maintenance perhaps, on your heavy training days, and then have a slightly larger deficit on your rest days. Or maybe higher calories on weekends, lower during the week.
So keeping the body guessing a bit more and not letting it settle into one low level.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It provides a different stimulus than just that constant monotonous restriction. It might help mitigate some of the adaptation.
Okay.
Well, then there's the concept of a refeed. This is usually shorter than a diet break, maybe just 1 or 2 planned days of significantly higher calorie intake, primarily coming from carbohydrates.
Like a planned high-carb day.
Exactly. Refeeds are often used more strategically when someone is already quite lean and hitting a stubborn plateau. The big influx of carbs can help replenish muscle glycogen, which can boost training performance and can give a temporary boost to hormones like leptin, potentially helping metabolism and reducing hunger for a short while.
But it's a planned, targeted increase, not just a random cheat day.
Absolutely. It's strategic. And alongside these nutritional tactics, sometimes simply changing up your exercise stimulus, maybe the type of training, the intensity, the volume, can also provide a new challenge for your body and help break through stagnation.
So these tools, diet breaks, calorie cycling, refeeds, changing training, they aren't magic bullets, but they sound like intelligent ways to manage this adaptation process, working with your physiology instead of just fighting against it.
That's exactly the idea. They turn plateau management from just a frustrating roadblock into another strategic phase of the whole journey. It acknowledges that the body adapts and provides tools to navigate that.
Thinking about all these principles together, energy balance being the absolute core, then the specific strategies for bulking and cutting, the realities of body recomposition, and now dealing with metabolic adaptation and plateaus. It really underscores something crucial about this whole endeavor, doesn't it?
What's that?
It just highlights this constant interplay, this tension maybe between needing to follow the general scientific guidelines like energy balance and protein needs, but also the absolute necessity of listening super closely to your own body, understanding its unique response, and being willing and able to adapt your strategy based on that feedback. It's clearly not a one-size-fits-all formula. It's dynamic.
Right.
Okay, let's jump right in. We've been looking through some really interesting material, all focusing on nutrition strategies for building muscle and boosting performance.
That's right. It's clear that what you eat is just as critical as how you train. So our goal here is to unpack the key principles and practical takeaways from these sources.
Yeah, cut through some of the confusion maybe. We want to highlight what really matters for optimizing results through diet and hydration. All right, so first up, a classic debate, meal frequency. Should you eat 3 big meals, or is it better to do 5 or 6 smaller ones like bodybuilders often do? What did the sources say?
It's funny how this one keeps coming up, isn't it? The big takeaway seems to be about the total amount you eat in a day. The research suggests that if your daily calories and macros, your protein, carbs, fats are the same, well, the actual number of meals might not make a huge difference for muscle growth itself.
Oh, okay. So getting enough overall is the main thing.
Absolutely. That consistency, hitting those daily targets, that's foundational. Your body's sort of looking at the bigger picture, not necessarily just a few hours at a time.
But there must be reasons why people lean towards more frequent meals, right? Especially in the bodybuilding world. Any advantages mentioned?
Yeah, definitely some potential upsides. One idea is spreading out your protein. If you aim for maybe 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal, doing that more often could potentially keep muscle protein synthesis stimulated more consistently.
Like flipping the muscle building switch on more often.
Kind of, yeah. And another point is blood sugar. Eating smaller, balanced meals more frequently can help keep your energy levels more stable, avoid those big energy dips, and maybe help manage hunger better too.
And I guess trying to eat, say, 3,000 calories in just 3 meals could be pretty uncomfortable for some people, digestion-wise.
Exactly. That's a big practical point. Just the sheer volume can be tough. So yeah, the 5-6 meal approach often comes down to that practicality, consistent nutrients, maybe better hunger control, easier digestion for some.
But the flip side, fitting 6 meals into a normal workday, that sounds challenging. Any downsides discussed?
Oh, absolutely. Time and effort are the big ones. Planning, prepping, carrying food around, actually stopping to eat. It takes a lot of organization and can be tough to fit into a busy schedule or social life.
And probably stressful for some people trying to stick to that perfectly.
For sure. If trying to eat every 3 hours becomes a major source of stress, that can actually work against you, hormonally speaking. It kind of begs the question, does a small potential physiological edge outweigh the real-world stress and hassle for you personally?
So if hitting the daily totals is priority 1 and frequency is more about preference and practicality, what's the main message for listeners?
Flexibility is key. Find what works for your lifestyle, what feels good for your digestion, what helps you manage hunger. Don't get hung up on a specific number. Focus on hitting your overall daily calorie and macro goals consistently with good quality foods. That's the real bedrock.
Okay, so total intake trumps frequency for the day overall. What about the timing around the workout itself? Nutrient timing, is that make or break?
The sources generally position nutrient timing as more of an optimization tool. It's not the absolute foundation, especially if your overall nutrition throughout the day is solid. Think of it as fine-tuning for potentially better performance and recovery.
Got it. So let's break it down. What about before hitting the gym?
The general advice is to get some carbs and a bit of protein in, say, 1 to 3 hours beforehand. The carbs are for energy, obviously, to fuel the workout. And the protein might help reduce muscle breakdown during training and kind of prime the pump for recovery afterwards.
Anything to avoid right before.
Yeah, you probably want to be careful with large amounts of fat or fiber right before you train. They digest slowly and can sit heavy, potentially causing stomach upset or cramps during your workout. Not ideal.
Makes sense. And during the workout, do most people doing weights need intra-workout shakes?
For a typical lifting session, maybe around an hour long, probably not necessary. Your pre-workout meal and your body's stored energy should be enough. But if you're doing really long sessions, like 90 minutes plus or something super intense, then maybe a little bit of easily digestible carbs, like in a sports drink or perhaps some BCAAs, might help delay fatigue.
Okay. And then the big one, the anabolic window after training. Is it really this tiny 30-minute window we used to hear about?
Ah, yes, the window. Well, the understanding highlighted in the sources has definitely evolved. It seems that window is much wider than we thought. It's not like you have to slam a shake the second you drop the weights. Muscle protein synthesis stays elevated for quite a while after you train.
Oh, really? So less panic involved.
Exactly. Getting in good quality protein, maybe around 30 grams or so, and some carbohydrates within, say, 1 to 2 hours post-workout seems perfectly effective. Some sources even suggest the window really encompasses the time both before and after training, maybe up to 4 hours total around the workout.
So the focus is getting those recovery nutrients in within a reasonable time frame, not a frantic rush.
Precisely. The carbs help restock the energy you burned, and the protein provides the building blocks to repair and rebuild the muscle tissue.
So again, it comes back to the big picture. Consistent daily intake is number one, but timing can be a helpful strategy, especially for recovery.
That's a great way to put it. Total intake is the foundation. Timing is like adding a turbocharger. It can be especially useful for beginners, maybe, helping establish good routines and potentially speeding up adaptation just a bit.
Right, let's shift focus now to something absolutely basic but critical. Hydration, water.
Yes, so fundamental. The sources really emphasize how crucial water is, not just for survival, but specifically for muscle function, growth, and performance in the gym.
And that stat always gets me. Muscles are something like 76% water.
Yeah, it really highlights how water is literally part of the muscle tissue structure. It's involved in almost everything muscles do: cell volume, transporting nutrients in and waste out, cooling you down, keeping joints moving smoothly.
And being even slightly dehydrated can seriously tank your workout.
Oh, significantly. The sources mention that losing just 2% of your body weight through sweat, which isn't that much, really can potentially cut your performance by, like, up to 25%.
Wow, 25%, that's huge. How does that small amount of water loss cause such a big problem?
Well, it thickens your blood slightly, reducing blood volume. That means your heart has to work harder, less oxygen, and fewer nutrients get delivered to your working muscles, and waste products don't get cleared as efficiently. It leads to fatigue setting in faster, increases your risk of cramps. And interestingly, even mild dehydration can apparently increase muscle protein breakdown, so it directly impacts your recovery and growth potential.
So it's hitting you on multiple fronts. Okay, what are the general guidelines for how much water we should be drinking?
For general health, maybe 2 to 3 liters a day is a common recommendation. But if you're active, training hard, sweating a lot, or in a hot climate, that number can go way up. We're talking potentially 3.5 to 7 liters or even more, depending on the individual.
That's quite a range. Any specific tips for around training time?
Yeah, the sources suggest things like drinking maybe 600 milliliters or so in the couple of hours before you train, then during, aiming for sips, maybe 150, 250 milliliters every 15, 20 minutes to try and offset sweat loss, and then making sure to rehydrate properly afterwards, maybe based on how much weight you lost during the session, if you want to be precise.
And simple things like just carrying a water bottle around help, or checking urine color.
Totally. Having a bottle with you is the best reminder. And yeah, the urine check is a simple gauge. Aiming for a pale lemonade-like color is usually a good sign you're well hydrated. Darker means you probably need more water.
Oh, and they also mentioned that drinks like coffee or tea can have a mild diuretic effect, so you might need a little extra plain water to compensate.
Okay, we've covered the big macros in water. What about the micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals?
Right, the supporting players, but absolutely vital. You need them in smaller amounts than protein, carbs, and fats, but they're crucial for, well, pretty much everything your body does, including energy production and recovery. They don't give you energy directly, but they help unlock the energy from the macros.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to think about it. They act like spark plugs or facilitators for countless processes. They help convert food into usable energy, transport oxygen, think iron, maintain fluid balance, support your immune system, which definitely takes a hit from hard training, and they act as antioxidants to deal with exercise-related stress.
And athletes or very active people might need more of certain ones.
It seems likely, yeah. Due to higher metabolic rates, maybe increased losses through sweat, or just the increased demands of repair and recovery. Sources often mention things like B vitamins for energy, C and E as antioxidants, minerals like calcium and magnesium for muscles and bones, and iron for oxygen transport.
So what happens if you fall short on some of these? Does it impact training?
It definitely can. Deficiencies can mean your energy production isn't as efficient, leading to fatigue quicker. Your immune system might be weaker, making you more likely to get sick and miss training days. Recovery can be slower. And over the long term, deficiencies can lead to bigger health issues, obviously. It all undermines your ability to train hard and consistently.
So how do we make sure we're getting enough? Is it all about supplements?
The best approach, strongly emphasized in the sources, is getting them from a balanced whole foods diet. Lots of different fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, lean proteins, dairy. That's where you find the good stuff.
Ah, the old eat the rainbow advice.
It's genuinely good advice. A variety of colors usually means a variety of nutrients. Food provides these micronutrients in a complex package, often with other compounds that help your body use them effectively. Supplements should really be seen as filling specific gaps, ideally based on some evidence or professional advice, not as a replacement for a good diet.
Okay, last major point our sources cover is something maybe less glamorous, but they frame it as fundamental. Tracking your food, logging what you eat.
Yeah, this is presented as potentially the most powerful first step for anyone serious about managing your nutrition for results. It's really about awareness.
Because we're often not great at guessing how much we actually eat.
Exactly. It's called perception error. People tend to underestimate calories, maybe overestimate protein, and often have little idea about, say, their fiber or micronutrient intake. Tracking just gives you the objective facts. Here's what you actually consumed.
So what details should people track?
The basics are usually what food, how much of it, and using a scale for grams or ounces is way more accurate than cups or guessing and maybe the time you ate it. If you can track calories and macros, that provides even more detailed insight.
And tools. Apps, old school notebook.
Whatever you'll stick with consistently. Apps are convenient with big databases. Notebooks work too. The key, though, is accuracy in measuring portions, especially at first. Using that kitchen scale really helps make the data meaningful.
Okay, so you put in the effort to track. What are the payoffs?
Huge payoffs.
Yeah.
First, you get that clear picture. Okay, this is my starting point. You can immediately see where you might need to adjust. Second, you start seeing patterns. When I eat this for lunch, I feel better during my afternoon workout. Or, wow, I'm actually not getting as much protein as I thought.
So you can connect the dots for your own body.
Precisely. Third, it's invaluable if you hit a plateau. Instead of just guessing why progress stalled, you have data. Maybe your calories crept down or your protein dropped off. And lastly, just seeing the log fill up with days where you hit your targets can be really motivating. It's visual proof of your consistency.
It does sound like it could feel like a chore at first, though.
Oh, it can be, no doubt. It takes discipline to build a habit. But the sources really stress that it becomes easier, quicker, and incredibly empowering once you get into the rhythm. Consistency trumps perfection, especially early on. Just log something.
So the big picture on tracking.
It's fundamentally about self-awareness. It removes the guesswork, gives you concrete data to make informed decisions, troubleshoot problems, and ultimately reach your goals much more effectively. It's the feedback loop that drives progress. So to kind of wrap it up, we've touched on these key pillars. Realizing total daily intake is paramount over rigid meal schedules. Using nutrient timing as a smart optimization strategy. The absolute necessity of staying hydrated, getting those vital micronutrients from whole foods, and the power of tracking to know where you actually stand.
Yeah, it's clear they all work together, isn't it? Not just separate rules.
Absolutely. And maybe the final thought to leave you with is just that how interconnected it all is, how the water you drink, the timing of your meals, the variety on your plate, it all feeds into this complex system of building muscle and improving performance. It really highlights how consistent, small, informed nutritional choices day after day are what truly compound over time to create those significant results you're working towards. Okay, so you've made the call. You're serious about building muscle, getting more defined, really changing your physique.
It's a great goal to have. Powerful motivator.
Definitely. But that first step, it can feel like walking into a maze. right? So much advice, so many ways to, well, mess it up.
Absolutely. Information overload is real.
So today, we're going to dive deep into some common missteps, especially the ones beginners make with diet and just their whole mindset, really.
Yeah, pulling out the practical stuff, the things that can help you sidestep those early traps.
Exactly. Build smarter from day one. Okay, let's get into the first big one that keeps popping up.
Right. Mistake number one. This pervasive fear of eating enough, especially carbohydrates.
Yes, the classic eat less to get lean idea, which, sounds logical if you only think about fat loss.
It does on the surface.
But for building muscle, the analysis makes it super clear it's totally counterproductive. Muscle needs fuel, it needs materials.
It absolutely does. Building muscle protein synthesis, it costs energy, a lot of it.
So if you slash calories too hard,
especially if you drop below your basal metabolic rate, that's just your basic resting energy needs, you run into some serious problems.
like losing the very muscle you're trying to build.
Bingo. Your body's in crisis mode, right? It might actually break down muscle for fuel because in that state, it can be easier to access than fat.
Wow, okay.
And it gets worse long term. We see that severe restriction often leads to your metabolism actually slowing down.
Your body gets, too efficient.
Exactly. It starts conserving energy, lowers your metabolic rate, which ironically makes it easier to gain fat back later when you do start eating more.
And forget about good workouts. If you're running on fumes,
Your training quality just tanks. Carbs are your main, high-octane fuel for intense exercise. Not enough carbs. You get tired fast, poor focus, less strength. You just can't push hard enough in your workouts to really trigger that muscle growth.
plus you're risking other stuff, right? Like nutrient gaps, messing with hormones, immunity, just feeling wiped out all the time.
Definitely. And let's be real, extreme diets are mentally draining. They're just not sustainable for most people.
So what's the smarter approach then, based on what we've looked at?
It's about moving away from those drastic cuts. First, figure out your actual energy needs. Your total daily energy expenditure, or TDE. That includes your activity levels.
Okay.
If fat loss is also a goal, aim for a modest deficit. Maybe 10%, 20% below your TDEE. Gradual is key, not a crash diet.
Enough to lose fat, but still fuel muscle growth and workouts.
Precisely. And crucially, don't be afraid of carbs. They are essential fuel.
Right.
Focus on quality sources, complex carbs like brown rice, sweet potatoes, oats, fruits, veggies. They give you that sustained energy release.
So it's less about not eating and more about eating smartly, finding that balance to fuel the work and provide the building blocks.
You got it. Which kind of leads nicely into the second mistake.
Okay, what's next?
This often happens when people maybe overcorrect for mistake one. They become totally fixated on protein and ignore everything else.
The protein obsession. Okay, I get it. Protein builds muscle, so pile it on, right? More must be better.
That's the thought process, yeah. But the analysis used a great analogy. It's like thinking only engine oil matters for your car.
And you forget about the gas or the coolant.
Exactly. You need the whole system.
Fine.
So if you overdo protein and neglect carbs, you're still likely short on energy for those tough workouts.
Right, back to the fuel issue.
Yep. You fatigue quicker, can't train as hard, limits your growth potential.
And wasn't there something about hormones, too, with fats?
Big time. Healthy fats are critical for hormone production, including testosterone, which is, pretty important for muscle growth, / fats too low, and you can negatively impact those levels. Plus, a really underbalanced diet can actually make it harder for your body to even absorb and use the protein you are eating effectively.
Interesting. And just slamming tons of protein.
Yeah.
That can be tough on your digestion, maybe even kidneys long term, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you have underlying issues.
It can be, yeah. And you're still potentially missing out on vitamins, minerals, fiber from other food groups if protein is your only focus.
So the solution isn't just more protein.
No, it's about balanced macros. Figuring out the right ratio of carbs, protein, and fats for your goals, your body.
Okay.
Hit your protein target. Sure, that 1.6 to maybe 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight is a common range we see cited for muscle building. But make sure you're getting enough carbs for energy and enough healthy fats for hormones and general health.
And variety matters.
Yeah.
Right? Getting those nutrients from different foods.
Absolutely crucial. And understanding that protein intake has a point where more just doesn't do much extra for muscle growth. There are diminishing returns.
So it's about synergy, everything working together.
Exactly. Balance is king.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk mistake number 3. This sounds like where things get really rigid, extreme restriction.
Yeah, labeling certain foods or whole food groups as bad and cutting them out completely, like
Yeah.
all fats or all dairy or gluten, even without a medical reason.
This feels like diet culture stuff sometimes.
It often is. And look, it might seem to work short term, you might lose some weight, often water initially. But it causes real problems down the line, and it's incredibly hard to stick with.
The most obvious issue is probably nutrient deficiencies, right?
Yeah.
You cut out whole groups.
For sure. You miss out on vital nutrients. But it's also the psychological impact. Constant restriction creates so much stress around food.
Yeah, eating becomes a minefield.
Right. It can lead to obsessive thoughts, takes the enjoyment out of meals, reduces your quality of life.
And social events, forget about it. Eating out, meals with friends, becomes a nightmare.
Exactly. Huge source of stress and isolation for people. And this extreme restriction, it often backfires spectacularly.
How so?
It builds up intense cravings, like a pressure cooker. Eventually, you lose control, you binge on the forbidden foods.
The binge restrict cycle.
Precisely. Then comes the guilt, which fuels more restriction, and you're trapped in this cycle. It's a slippery slope and can increase the risk of developing disordered eating.
So the answer isn't just willpower and avoiding bad foods forever.
Definitely not. The guidance points towards shifting perspective. Instead of forbidden, think less often or smaller portions. It's about managing frequency and quantity.
More flexibility.
Way more flexibility. Things like the 80-20 rule get mentioned a lot. Aim for, say, 80% nutrient-dense whole foods, but allow that 20% for foods you enjoy in moderation.
Takes the pressure off. Makes it sustainable.
Massively. And focusing on variety across all food groups helps ensure you're getting everything you need.
It sounds like it's really about building a healthier relationship with food overall.
That's the core of it. Seeing food as fuel, yes, but also as something to be enjoyed. Letting go of the guilt. Learning to listen to your body's signals. Hunger. Fullness.
So balance and flexibility beat perfectionism.
Every time. Aim for consistency in your healthy habits, not some impossible ideal. Occasional deviations happen. Build the resilience to get back on track.
Okay, that's huge. Mistake number 4. Oh, this one's everywhere.
Yeah.
The supplement trap.
The magic bullet mindset. Thinking protein powders, creatine, BCAAs, fat burners, whatever the latest thing is, are the secret sauce.
Yeah, see it all the time with beginners. They focus so much on the supplements.
Yet they completely neglect the foundation, their actual diet. It's a really dangerous mindset, honestly. It holds people back.
Because they're supplements, right? They add to something, they don't replace it.
Exactly. The analysis is crystal clear. Supplements cannot make up for a poor diet built on whole, nutrient-rich foods. If your foundation isn't solid, the supplements won't do what you hope they will.
You're just throwing money away, basically.
Pretty much. And it skews your priorities. You spend hours researching the best BCAA instead of planning your meals or focusing on your training consistency or getting enough sleep.
All this stuff that actually moves the needle.
Right. And the marketing creates these wild expectations. You think this powder will transform you overnight. When it doesn't, you get disillusioned, maybe even quit.
Are there health risks, too?
There can be. Some supplements might have questionable ingredients, or if you take way too much or combine things poorly, there can be downsides.
So the expert advice is?
Food first, always. Prioritize getting your nutrients from real food, full stop.
And supplements.
Consider them carefully, and only if there's a genuine gap in your diet you can't fill, or if something has strong scientific backing for your specific goals.
Like whey protein if you genuinely struggle to eat enough protein.
Potentially, yes. Or creatine, which has a ton of solid research behind it for strength and power. But even then, they come after the diet is sorted.
And rely on evidence, not hype.
Absolutely. Talk to qualified professionals, look at the research. Don't just believe the marketing or what some random person says online.
The real supplements are good habits.
Couldn't say it better. Solid nutrition, consistent training, enough sleep, managing stress. Those are the powerful levers. Supplements are, at best, a tiny bit of extra support if everything else is already dialed in. They are not shortcuts.
Which leads perfectly into the last big mistake we looked at. Getting discouraged too easily, lacking that long-term view.
Impatience. Maybe the biggest progress killer of all for beginners.
Yeah?
Look, the reality is making significant, lasting changes to your body naturally. It takes time. It takes consistent effort. Weeks, months, years.
But people expect results like yesterday.
Exactly. They see stuff online, maybe edited photos or ads promising crazy transformations in weeks, and they expect that for themselves. Then they get frustrated when it doesn't happen instantly and they just give up.
Those unrealistic expectations are brutal.
They really are. And when you're only focused on the end result, you miss out on appreciating the process. Getting stronger, learning discipline, feeling healthier day to day. There's so much value in the journey itself.
And trying to rush it can backfire, right? Like injury risk.
Huge risk. Trying workouts that are way too advanced or going back to those extreme diets for quick results.
Yep.
You're much more likely to get hurt or burn out.
And then people jump from plan to plan.
Constantly. They don't see results in 2 weeks, so they switch to something else entirely. That lack of consistency guarantees they won't see results.
Just creates more stress and negativity around the whole thing.
Totally. So the solutions we see emphasized are, first, setting realistic goals. Be honest about where you're starting, what's feasible with your life. Think marathon, not sprint.
Okay.
And shift your focus to the process. Celebrate the small wins along the way.
Like lifting a bit heavier or sticking to your meal plan for the week.
Exactly. Acknowledge that progress. Did you add weight to the bar, improve your form, hit all your workouts, nail your nutrition? Those little victories keep you motivated. They are the progress.
And recognize that consistency is everything.
It really is. Visible changes are the sum of all that consistent effort.
Yeah.
Don't freak out over small day-to-day changes on the scale or a workout that felt a bit off. Look at the bigger picture, the long-term trend.
Tracking things helps there, I bet. Like a workout log or photos.
Incredibly helpful. It gives you objective proof that you are making progress, even when it feels slow sometimes. You can look back and see how far you've actually come.
And mindset is key too, right?
Absolutely. Cultivate a growth mindset. Instead of, I'm not seeing results, I suck at this, think, okay, this is challenging. What can I learn? How can I adjust and keep improving? Embrace the effort.
So impatience really is the enemy here.
It truly is. But if you cultivate patience, learn to enjoy the process, stay consistent with smart habits.
The results will come. And you gain more than just muscle along the way.
Well said. It's about the whole transformation, inside and out.
So if we had to boil down everything we've pulled from this deep dive, what's the single most important thought for someone starting out?
I think it's that genuine, lasting change doesn't come from finding some secret trick or extreme approach.
Yeah, it's not about quick fixes. It's about building the mundane,
Maybe.
but powerful habits.
Exactly. It's committing to sustainable practices grounded in patience, finding that balance, and showing up with consistent, intelligent effort day after day, week after week. That's where the real magic happens. Okay, let's dive straight into something really fundamental today. How to actually build healthy habits that stick.
Yeah, not just for like a few weeks, right?
Exactly. But habits that truly become part of your life for, long-term well-being and hitting those physical goals. We're exploring some material that really tries to cut through the noise, to get at the core principles behind making sustainable lifestyle changes.
That's right. The mission here is really to pull out those crucial insights, those nuggets of knowledge about achieving lasting health outcomes.
Right.
It's definitely about looking beyond just the conventional diet and exercise advice, the sort of quick fix stuff, and understanding the bigger picture the sources are pointing to.
Yeah, because let's be honest, almost everyone's tried some kind of temporary diet, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely.
And the material we're looking at gives some pretty clear reasons why those approaches, well, they often fall short in the long run.
They really do. The sources are quite direct about this trap of fad diets. I mean, sure, they might give you some quick results initially.
Yeah, you see that number drop, maybe.
Right, but they tend to be overly restrictive,
Okay.
and that can lead to nutritional gaps, maybe even health issues down the line if you stick with them too long.
Okay.
Plus, they're just incredibly hard to sustain, in the context of a normal life with social events and stress and everything else. And the data points towards that really frustrating yo-yo effect.
Yeah.
Losing weight, gaining it back, maybe even more. It's super common.
And it sounds like it can mess with your relationship with food, too.
Definitely. Critically, they often foster this negative, kind of restrictive relationship with food itself. Lots of guilt and anxiety.
So the key takeaway isn't just picking the right diet plan, but fundamentally changing how you approach eating altogether.
Precisely. The core principle that comes up again and again is establishing healthy eating as a sustainable, integrated lifestyle habit.
A habit, not a temporary state.
Exactly. It needs to become part of your daily rhythm, not some constant battle you're fighting with yourself.
Okay, so if we're shifting towards building that kind of lifestyle habit, what are the foundational principles the sources identify? Like, what does that actually look like day to day?
Well, the sources really zero in on a few key pillars. First up is balance.
Okay.
And this isn't just about counting calories. It's about consistently getting a good mix of your macronutrients, proteins, carbs, fats, which give you energy and are building blocks,
Right.
alongside those essential micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. The material really stresses that cutting out entire food groups, like some fad diets do, often creates imbalances that just aren't healthy or sustainable.
Got it. So integrating everything you need.
Yes. Then there's moderation. And the sources make a really insightful point here, I think.
Right.
They argue there are no inherently bad foods, only bad eating habits.
That's a shift.
It is. It's about the excessive consumption, the patterns. That's the issue. This framing moves away from guilt, toward more mindful eating, enjoying foods you love, even treats, but in sensible amounts.
That reframes things quite a bit.
Right.
What else do they highlight?
Variety is next. Eating a wide range of natural, unprocessed foods helps ensure you get a broader spectrum of nutrients. Things simple supplements just can't replicate.
And probably keeps things interesting, too.
Exactly. It makes healthy eating more enjoyable, prevents boredom, which is honestly huge for sticking with it long term.
Makes sense.
Then, individuality. The material is crystal clear on this. There's no single perfect diet for everyone.
Right.
Your personal preferences, your lifestyle, your health status, your specific goals, all of that has to shape how you eat. What works wonders for one person might be totally wrong for someone else.
And the last one you mentioned seems to bring it all together.
Absolutely. Enjoyment. Food is, it's deeply tied to culture, social life, personal pleasure.
Yeah.
The sources really underline that finding healthy foods and preparing them in ways you genuinely like is non-negotiable for sustainability. If healthy eating feels like a chore or a punishment, it just won't last. Simple as that.
That makes total sense. But okay, how do you actually start putting these principles into action without feeling totally overwhelmed? The sources mention making changes gradually, right?
Yes, and this is arguably one of the most crucial practical takeaways. Instead of trying this massive, overnight overhaul,
Which almost never works.
exactly, it almost always backfires. The sources really advocate for incremental change. Think small, manageable steps.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so they suggest focusing on adding something positive first, rather than just taking things away. For instance, maybe consistently adding an extra serving of vegetables to one meal each day. Or consciously choosing water over sugary drinks, say, 80% of the time. The research they point to suggests these small, consistent wins build confidence. They create this powerful habit loop, much more effective than trying to flip your entire diet upside down at once.
So it's about building momentum with those little successes.
Okay.
And what about when life inevitably happens? You slip up, go off plan.
Yeah. That brings us to flexibility and resilience. This is huge. The sources strongly advise just abandoning the quest for perfection. It's not realistic.
Right.
Deviations are going to happen. Social events, holidays, a stressful day at work. The real skill to cultivate, according to this material, isn't perfect execution.
Okay.
It's the resilience to bounce back, without beating yourself up, without guilt or self-recrimination.
How do they suggest viewing those slip-ups then?
They suggest seeing a deviation not as a failure, but just as a single data point. Okay, that happened. And then simply returning to your established healthy patterns at the very next meal or opportunity.
So no spiraling?
Exactly, no spiraling. That mindset is absolutely crucial for long-term maintenance, for integrating these habits naturally into the messy, unpredictable flow of real life.
Okay, so we've covered the eating habits that shift to a balanced, moderate, varied, personal, and enjoyable lifestyle approach, built gradually with resilience. Makes sense. But the material makes a really strong case that achieving your physical goals goes way beyond just what's on your plate and how much you exercise.
Absolutely. This is where stress management and sleep really step into the spotlight as critical, often, frankly, underestimated players.
Right. People focus so much on diet and workouts.
Yeah, but the sources describe stress and sleep almost like the invisible architecture holding everything else up. They profoundly influence your physical recovery, your hormone regulation, and even your psychological ability to actually stick to your healthy eating and exercise plan.
Wow. Okay.
You can have the most perfect diet plan, the best training program, but if your stress is through the roof and you're barely sleeping, you're essentially building on shaky ground.
Okay. So how does stress specifically sabotage progress? What's the mechanism there?
Well, the sources detail the impact of chronic stress, primarily through elevated levels of the hormone cortisol.
Cortisol.
Heard of it?
Yeah. And what's significant is that consistently high cortisol levels do a few nasty things. They promote the breakdown of muscle tissue for energy. Not what you want if you're trying to get stronger or build muscle.
Definitely not.
They encourage the storage of stubborn fat, particularly around the abdomen. And they powerfully drive cravings for those calorie-dense, highly palatable foods, high sugar, high fat, high salt stuff.
The comfort foods.
Exactly. It's basically a biological response that actively works against your efforts to build muscle and lose fat.
That really connects the mental state to the physical outcome. Okay, what about sleep deprivation? How does that impact things beyond just making you feel groggy?
Sleep is prime time for physical repair and growth. A lot of that is facilitated by growth hormone, which is mostly released during deep sleep stages.
Right.
So lack of quality sleep inhibits this release, slowing down muscle recovery and growth. But for nutritional goals, the impact on appetite hormones is particularly striking.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more. The sources highlight how not getting enough sleep throws the balance between two key hormones way off. Ghrelin,
The hunger hormone.
yep, often called the hunger hormone, and leptin, the satiety hormone, the one that tells you you're full.
Okay.
When you're sleep deprived, ghrelin levels shoot up significantly, making you feel much hungrier. At the same time, leptin levels drop, meaning you feel less full and satisfied after you eat.
Wow. So you're basically chemically wired to be hungrier and less satisfied by the same amount of food when you haven't slept well.
Exactly. It's a double whammy. It makes overeating much more likely and makes sticking to any kind of controlled eating plan significantly harder. It's a direct biochemical consequence of poor sleep.
Okay, this is clearly critical stuff. So given their huge impact, what do the sources suggest are the most effective ways to, manage stress better and actually improve sleep?
For stress management, the recommendations often include regular physical activity. The sources know exercise itself acts as a powerful stress buffer, partly by helping regulate those cortisol levels we talk about.
Okay, so exercise helps manage stress from exercise, in a way.
Well, yeah, but also stress from life in general. But crucially, adequate rest and avoiding overtraining are also key. You don't want physical stress to become chronic.
Right.
They also emphasize incorporating relaxation techniques. Things like meditation, yoga, or even just simple deep breathing exercises can make a big difference. And cultivating strong social support through positive relationships and engaging hobbies, stuff that boosts psychological well-being.
Good practical tips. And for sleep, what are the main strategies outlined there?
The sources strongly advocate for building a consistent sleep schedule. That means aiming for the same bedtime and wake-up time as much as possible, even on weekends.
That helps regulate your body clock, right?
Exactly, your circadian rhythm. Creating an optimal sleep environment is also vital, making your bedroom really dark, quiet, and cool. That signals to your body it's time to rest.
Makes sense.
Improving pre-sleep habits is another big one. Winding down properly, reducing exposure to bright screens from phones and TVs, avoiding caffeine or alcohol too close to bedtime, these all prepare your mind and body for sleep.
Okay.
And of course, prioritizing the recommended duration is foundational. Generally, that's 7 to 9 hours for most adults.
So listening to this, it's clear these aren't just like optional extras. They're fundamental pillars supporting your nutritional and physical goals.
Absolutely. The material really reinforces that managing nutrition and achieving physical goals isn't something that happens in a vacuum. It's deeply interconnected with your entire lifestyle, how you live day to day, how you recover, how you manage your internal state. Effective stress management and quality sleep create the biological and psychological foundation that makes sticking with healthy habits actually possible.
This all really points towards this being, well, much less of a quick fix and much more of a long-term journey.
It absolutely does. The sources frame the path to significant, lasting physical change, very much like a marathon, not a sprint. They acknowledge right up front that those dramatic overnight transformations you see marketed everywhere, they're unrealistic. And experiencing plateaus or setbacks or moments of frustration that's completely normal, it's an expected part of the process.
And within that marathon, what's the single most important element for, actually going the distance and reaching the finish line?
The sources consistently, again and again, identify consistency as the ultimate virtue.
Just showing up.
Just showing up. Day after day, week after week, even when it's not perfect, even when you don't feel like it, that's what drives long-term results.
Yeah.
But, and this is key, they stress that consistency isn't just about raw willpower. It's powerfully supported, maybe even driven by your mindset.
Okay, let's unpack that mindset piece. What are the components the sources really emphasize for fueling that consistency?
A primary one is developing process-oriented thinking.
Me too.
Meaning, instead of solely fixating on the distant outcome, like the final weight on the scale or the dream physique. The sources suggest finding satisfaction and even joy in the daily effort itself. In the incremental growth, the simple act of doing the healthy habit, they highlight the value in those intangible gains, feeling a bit stronger, the satisfaction of cooking a healthy meal, the self-discipline you're building along the way.
So appreciating the walk itself or the healthy meal itself, not just what it might lead to way down the road.
Exactly. And closely linked to that is celebrating small wins.
Okay.
The material encourages actively acknowledging and, praising yourself for hitting those small, consistent goals, making it to all your planned workouts for the week, successfully navigating a tricky social eating situation, adding that extra vegetable serving like we talked about.
Right.
These small victories build momentum, they reinforce that positive habit loop, and they counteract that feeling that you're not making progress just because the scale isn't moving dramatically this week.
What do the sources say about dealing with those inevitable moments when you fall off track or make a mistake?
This is so crucial. Letting go of perfectionism. The source is really clear that striving for perfection is basically self-sabotage in this context.
Right, because it's impossible.
It's impossible. Mistakes will happen. The focus shouldn't be on being flawless, but on developing the resilience to learn from those deviations and just quickly get back to your pattern.
Okay.
They specifically warn against that all-or-nothing trap. The thinking that, I missed one gym session or I ate that piece of cake so I've ruined everything. Might as well give up for the week.
Yeah, that spiral again.
Exactly. It's about progress, not perfection. Reframing those slip-ups as learning opportunities, not total failures.
Okay. What other mindset elements?
Another key piece is comparing to yourself. The sources strongly advise measuring your progress against your past self, how you were doing last week, last month, last year.
Not against others.
Definitely not against others, especially not the often highly curated highlight reels you see on social media. Everyone's starting point, their genetics, their life circumstances are totally different. Comparing yourself externally is usually just unhelpful and demotivating. Your own unique journey is the only relevant benchmark.
Makes sense. And what role does our internal chatter, our self-talk, play in all this?
A really significant one. The sources discuss the power of positive self-talk, consciously using encouraging internal language, things like, I am capable, I'm getting stronger every day, I can handle this challenge. It helps maintain motivation, builds self-belief, and allows you to navigate difficult moments or setbacks far more effectively than harsh self-criticism.
Okay. And finally, is there value in not trying to white-knuckle it all alone?
Yes, absolutely. Utilizing support systems, whether that's a supportive partner or friend, a fitness community online or in person, an accountability group, or even professional coach. The sources really highlight that having external support can provide encouragement, practical advice, and that crucial accountability that's invaluable for staying consistent, especially during times when your own motivation might dip.
Listening to all this, it really sounds like this whole journey isn't just about sculpting a physical body, but maybe even more about building some profound inner strength.
It really is.
Yeah.
The material strongly suggests that this process inherently builds mental toughness. Things like patience, self-discipline, goal-setting skills, resilience, problem-solving. These are traits that inevitably spill over and positively impact so many other areas of your life. Consistency, when it's fueled by this kind of positive, resilient mindset, and when you find ways to actually enjoy the process, it truly leads to significant inner growth right alongside any physical changes you achieve.
So, okay, bringing this all together then. The sustainable approach to eating we talked about, understanding the absolutely critical kind of underlying impact of stress and sleep, and then grounding everything in consistency that's driven by a powerful, resilient mindset. These aren't really separate pieces, are they?
Not at all. The sources show just how deeply interwoven they are. You can try to optimize one area, maybe you nail the diet, but true, lasting success and genuine well-being seem to be achieved when you address all three holistically. Understanding this interconnectedness is incredibly valuable, I think, whatever your specific health and physical goals might be. It helps you see the whole picture.
It really makes you consider that maybe the true strength we cultivate in this whole process isn't just measured by, the weight we can lift or the numbers on a scale, but maybe it's more about the patience, the self-compassion, and the resilience we build along the way. Perhaps adopting these habits fundamentally transforms your relationship with yourself, not just your relationship with food or exercise.